My name is John Passfield. I'm going to read from my novel, Emily Bronte, More Myself Than I. A novel by John Passfield is the full title. Uh, and first of all, let's just look at the picture on the cover because that permeates, I guess you'd say, inspired the whole novel. It's Emily Bronte's picture of herself, and the interesting thing is her face is turned away. So when Emily Bronte thinks of herself, she thinks of a person whose face is turned away. So I found that very, very intriguing. Here's the summary on the back of the novel. Every evening, flanked by her two creative sisters, Charlotte and Anne, Emily Bronte sits down at the dining room table in the Haworth parsonage and writes. As she does so, her imagination compresses and transforms the information of the life experience that surrounds her in the parsonage and out on the moors into the diamond-hard imagery of her novel in progress, Wuthering Heights. So the title of this video is The Bronte Siblings. A subtitle could be Information Becomes Imagery. Well, what information? We know so little about the information, the everyday information in the mind of the historical Emily Bronte, that what is it that she turned into the imagery that is the Cathy and Heathcliff imagery of Wuthering Heights. So I had a problem, and here's a note I wrote as I was going over the readings for this video. There's so little information about the historical Emily Bronte, neither her experience nor her thought. So private was Emily Bronte that even Charlotte's friends didn't feel they knew what Emily was thinking. So my problem in terms of information to turn into imagery was that I didn't have any love affairs to consider as the information of her life that she would be turning into the imagery of her novel, Wuthering Heights. As my novel, Emily Bronte, More of Myself Than I, evolves through its chapters. So, what to consider as imagery that we do know about? I didn't wish to make anything up. I wanted to go by the historical record. Well, we do know about the lives of her siblings, Branwell, her brother, and her sisters, Charlotte and Anne. So I realized this when I read in detail about the Brontes, that the other three, there's a fair amount of information about them, but almost nothing about Emily. She stayed home more than they did. She didn't go out into the rough and tumble of the big wide world as often, and she came home earlier than they did and stayed. Therefore, embedded in the novel, in the imagery of my novel, Emily Bronte, More Myself Than I, is family information that becomes imagery in the mind of the writer, Emily Bronte, as she thinks about it. So Branwell information becomes Branwell imagery. Charlotte information becomes Charlotte imagery. Anne information becomes Anne imagery, and which in turn she transforms into the imagery of the novel that she is writing. Cathy imagery, Heathcliff imagery, the novel Wuthering Heights. In my novel, as she, Emily Bronte, is writing the imagery of the developing novel, Wuthering Heights, she is imagining herself to be Branwell, to be Charlotte, to be Anne in turn, by thinking of these people, actual people, two of them sitting beside her at the dining room table, as characters, by thinking as these people in character. I, Branwell, I, Charlotte, I, Anne, living my life. She does so by thinking of herself as Emily-Branwell, a hybrid, two people, one character. Emily-Charlotte, Emily-Anne, in the I person. I, Charlotte, living my life. I, Branwell, living my life. I, Anne, living my life. So the structure of the novel, there's two frames, chapter 1 and 16, with Emily Bronte as herself, I, Emily Bronte, writing my novel. Rotating from chapters 2 to 15, I, Emily, Cathy, living my life. I, Heathcliff, living my life. So that's the structure of the novel. Speaking of the structure of the chapters, though, what I'm going to read today is one paragraph from each chapter, one paragraph of thought in the mind of Emily Bronte as she's writing her novel, Wuthering Heights, as she alternately becomes I, Branwell, living my life, I, Charlotte, living my life, and I, Anne, living my life. So the only paragraph I'll read in chapter 1, which is Emily 1, is a paragraph about Branwell. It's about a third of a page, and there's about a third of a page in each chapter, which is a page in my handwriting, which is how I wrote these. So as she's writing her novel, she's imagining her brother Branwell as a character, and she's imagining herself as that character. This is a transition between her everyday life as Emily Bronte and this imaginary life as I, Kathy, and I, Heathcliff. Now, I'm not saying that Branwell is Heathcliff. I'm saying there's certain things in the Branwell story which, when squeezed, give you an essence, a thematic essence that then is transferred into these other characters. So, an important point. Page 7, sorry. About to board the coach for London, socks and cravats and tooth powder. So typical of the girls. I hardly listen as I allow my mind to expand. All I need are my paints and my brushes. I shall set London on its ear. I shall stun the Royal Academy. They shall not have seen my like. A portrait painter to the finest families of the realm. A townhouse in a fashionable esplanade. A coach and four for Sunday drives. My paintings hung with those of Holbein and Reynolds in ancestral halls. Members of Parliament, Prime Ministers, no doubt some day. A portrait of the Queen. Her growing family will keep me busy over the years. Receptions at court, attendance at plays, testimonials to all the other great men of the time. I pledge a toast to all and sundry. May the sun shine on you all as it has on me. Humble though my origins, I have reached the loftiest heights. The coach arrives. I spare a hug for my silly sisters. Your brother has soared above your heads. I shake the dust of Howard from my feet. And that's one paragraph in chapter 1, one image in the mind of Emily Bronte as she is writing her novel, Wuthering Heights. Here's chapter 2, page 14. If you have a copy of the novel, you can follow along. This is Emily Charlotte as a character. It is extremely dark. There's no moon tonight. The current is much faster than I thought it would be. I call up to the boat, but no one answers. I have nowhere to stay tonight, so I must get aboard. The man who rowed me out here keeps asking for his money. Are all Londoners so impatient? I call up towards the deck once again. Who calls? A gruff voice answers. It is I, Miss Bronte, one of your passengers. I've purchased a ticket for France. The current nudges the side of the rowboat, and I almost fall down. We sail tomorrow, the voice calls back. Come back tomorrow and we'll take you aboard. But I have nowhere to stay. I call up to the voice. The voice does not answer. I know no one here in London. I do not come from these parts. I can show you my ticket if you shine a lantern down. I can't let anyone come aboard, calls the voice. The man who brought me out here wants his money so he can leave. Why would they not put out some lanterns? It is dark out here on the Thames. The rowboat is rocking from the wash of another boat. I demand that you take me aboard. The rocking current is threatening to sweep me away. And that's one paragraph in chapter 2. Members of her family, two of them sitting at the table with her, becoming literary characters. And then she kind of extracts the thematic essence from those episodes. People who've had a more dramatic life than she has, or at least a more dramatic life than you and I know she had. As I say, I didn't want to make up anything, so I used what we knew. Page 22. Emily Ann. A position of my own, my very first venture out into the world. A chance to earn my own way and contribute to the family my proper share. I am sure that I must be more assertive than hithertofore I have been. A balance of kindness and of firmness will be best to cultivate as an ideal. I must overcome my shyness. I barely talk to the butcher boy when he calls, or to the stationer in the shop, or to those who make their pleasantries at church, but I shall make much more of an effort to assert myself when called upon to do so. But only as befitting my situation, of course. A governess, a chance to inculcate and influence. preparation, preparation, making a list and checking again. What shall I wear? What shall I pack? What shall I wash and iron and fold? Travel arrangements have all been secured. In a few days I shall be venturing out into the to and fro of the world, as governess to the children of Blake Hall. And then with chapter 4, we go back to another episode in the life of Branwell, as imagined, as lived imaginatively by Emily Branwell. Rain and mud, mud and rain, dreary landscape, weary day, riding on the coach, riding outside for lack of funds. If the pennies run out, I will have to walk in this mire for miles and miles. A miserable failure of a journey, bespattered with mud and grime. London was terrifyingly large, rattling wheels and plunging horses, every intersection a tangle of curses and fists. What will I tell the others? Charlotte will have nothing for me but contempt. She is counting on me to earn the daily bread. She will mention Holbein and Reynolds. She will hiss them in my face. She will ask if the Duke of Wellington sat for me. Rather face Anne or even Emily if I had my choice. Wheels squealing, horses neighing, hope we don't have to get out and walk. My head is reeling faster than one of these muddy wheels. I stink like no one's business, lost my money, lost my gloves, spattered in mud from top to toe. Drinking and drunk is all I remember, and being ejected out into the street, a terrifying night of torrential rain. My mind whirls round and round. Did I ever show my drawings? Did I ever present my card? Did I ever even go to the College of Art? And that's Branwell. And now we're on to chapter 5, page 40, with Emily Charlotte. So again, the idea is she's imagining her real people, her siblings, as characters, and imagining what it would be like to be those characters, to have that experience, to be able to extract the essence of those experiences thematically in order to be able to write imaginary characters with the same spirit and fire, hopes, disappointments, and so on as these characters. Page 40. Emily Charlotte. He is not handsome. He is a papist. He is married. He is stern and he is abrupt. Very little has passed between us. We concentrate, we two, on the task at hand. A word or two of instruction or correction. Noble thought is the silent companion of the private man. He has the mind of a man of a superior type. He is improving my writing abilities. Every word that he utters is so in earnest. Every lesson is considered and concise. His sleeve, his cravat, his countenance, his conviction as he speaks. Every word carefully considered, precisely placed. We spend so little time together. I learn a page of French a day. He is impressed, I am sure, with my memory. His eyes issue praise, though his lips do not. My special moment in each very busy day, and I am sure that he does not love his wife. Then in chapter 6, she becomes Emily Ann, her younger sister. Page 48. Lying awake for a moment or two before I sink, thankfully, into sleep at the end of a long and exhausting day. Oh, I cannot believe the amount of turmoil and toil. Exhausting, completely exhausting. These children have shaken me like a rag. To speak that way to an adult, to insult and belittle and tease. I have never known children to speak and act in such a manner as this. That I must control the little angels, but never discipline them at all? Why cannot the parents see this as an impossible task? And if I report calumny, cruelty, malignancy as traits to be nipped at once in the bud, why the parents look down at me coldly and blame it on me. The parents' blindness is causing their children a world of harm. To know the ideal as clearly as the sun is seen to shine through a stained glass window, and yet to have no power to be the cause of its realization, that is the worst of the burden which I have been charged to bear. These children will suffer when they are adults. I see misery in their lives when they go out into the world. I only hope that I can sleep. I shall be direly in need of the sustenance come the morrow. I have planted the seeds of my counsel. They are waiting and eager to grow. It is the parents who are blocking out the sun. So that's the end of the passages as far as chapter 6. And now I've decided, just to keep this video short, to leave out the passages, one per chapter in chapters 7, 8, 9, and 10, 11, 12. That's Branwell and the two sisters, each twice, I guess you'd say. And now I'll go on with chapter 13, Branwell, 14, Charlotte, and 15, Anne. And again, this is just to give the flavoring, not to give the whole novel. So in chapter 13, it's Branwell, and it's Emily thinking of Branwell, her actual brother, as a character in a novel which was never written, page 117. So Emily Branwell, having this experience. I am lying in the street. It is dark. The cobblestones are wet. It has been raining. I have no idea of time. I am between the Black Bull and the parsonage. It is a very quiet night. How long have I been lying here? Why has no one come along? Will my sisters come and look for me? Is there no one who knows I am gone? I must get home. I must get home and mix my paints. I'm going to paint again. The cobblestones are wet. Torrents of rain, I assume, before dawn. I shall reach home if I have to crawl. I will work on the family portrait, the one I did before. Dead of night, nothing stirring, not a sound. Palette, brushes, paint, just as soon as I get home. Not the steady hand of Holman, not the piercing eye of Reynolds, just the eye and the hand of the painter, Branwell Bronte, making improvements to my portrait of the Bronte Four. Lying here, so peaceful. Let it rain. Well, not in today's reading, but in another cycle of imagery in the novel, he actually improves, he feels, the Bronte family portrait, what I call the Bronte Four, by erasing himself, whitewashing himself out of that. But that's a whole separate strand in this novel. Chapter 14, page 127, is Emily having an experience as the character, Emily Charlotte. I sit and write these letters. He seldom sends a reply. Perhaps I should promise to cease if he'll deign to answer just one. It is months now since he has spared me even one word. I wonder whether he gets to read them. Surely his wife would not be so bold. The streams of the year are upon us. I wonder whether he minds the cold. Be sure to dress warmly when stepping outside. It can be cold, as you know, in Belgium. These sudden chills can take a person by surprise. You'll be pleased to know that I keep myself up on my French. I memorize at least a page a day. Oh, some days that is impossible, though I assure you that I try. It's just that some days there are distractions. Some days our lives are pulled each way. But then things settle down and the waves subside. Please send me just one letter. Please say that your life has turned out well. I want nothing for myself. I only want to hear well of you. You might mention your wife and children. I would hope that they are all well. It is your mind that I found so inspiring. It seems we sat and talked for hours. Of course, I have my sisters, but otherwise there's little here of a level of discourse in which one can exercise one's own best thoughts. Talk here is of the weather or of slips and pillowcases or the darning of Branwell's socks. I want only a few words of comfort. Things have gone badly for me of late. There are elements that are intolerable in all our lives. I only want to imagine a friend who thinks well of me. I only want to be able to think of you as a friend. I shall mail this on the morrow, whether come or whether go. Just one word is all I ask of you. Perhaps you would prefer that this letter from me should be the last? And then the last one in the novel though it's not the last chapter, chapter 15, is this one. And this is Anne, since we've been rotating. But it's Emily Anne. She lives the life of Anne in order to get the experience of Anne of Branwell, and of Charlotte, so she can write her novel. It's what allows her to write a novel. Maybe that's the way to phrase it better. Page 136, Emily Anne. My mind has a natural bent for noble instruction. I long to dedicate myself to the edification of those of my sex who are almost the equal of my own age. I do not have the constitution which the post of governess requires, not that of a horse, as Charlotte says, no, nor that of a galley slave, but I do have abundant desire that I should do some good in this world, as much as my limited talents will allow me to do. How to serve? How to serve? How best for me to serve? Well, Charlotte's idea. Of course, yes, Charlotte's idea. Take pen and paper and write a book of exemplary edification, a novel, as Charlotte suggests, one that will be of service to countless young ladies for whom such guidance is sorely in need. Like these girls I have tried so hard to win at Thorpe Green. Yes, the three of us writing novels. We must coax Emily to write one too. The three of us at the table, each of us dipping our pens in the ink, each of us setting down scenes of the actual life on the page. I cannot wait to return to the parsonage, at home in the dining room once again, our pen nibs scratching as the ink flows onto the page. So that's exactly the premise of this novel, that the three of them are sitting at the table, and each of them is writing a novel. In a moment, some conclusions. And now I'm going to read a couple of passages of conclusion, and then I'll mention some websites. Now, important to me to say this, and as I was reading this over, I wrote this note. Now, please note that I'm not saying that Branwell equals Heathcliff, not at all. And I'm not saying that there was no other life experience in the mind of the historical Emily Bronte that she turned into the imagery of her great novel. What I am exploring in this novel is the concept that there are elements of human relationships and their outcomes that Emily Bronte saw in her own life experience, in her personal life experience, her family's life experience, and her society's life experience, that she turned into literary art. Excuse me, the novel Wuthering Heights. We know almost nothing about her life and very little about her thoughts, except for the objective correlative, the image pattern, the personal myth that she left behind as a poetic novel, Wuthering Heights. So I've used what little information we do know about her, the stories of her siblings, to suggest that information becomes imagery in the mind of a creative person, in all persons, and is often transformed into other topic imagery, seemingly unrelated imagery that does not share a surface of detail with the lives of the creative person. Now, this other topic imagery is the story of Cathy and Heathcliff. We all do this, turn information into significant imagery. We form idea patterns of our experience. We transform these idea patterns into other surface imagery in our dreams and our nightmares. You wake up, you realize you've had a dream or a nightmare. The imagery can be astounding, so far away from your everyday life, but it's still a pattern of your thoughts. That's the point. That's what a novel is, or a poem. Some people, creative writers, transform the imagery of their dreams and nightmares into literature. That is the point of this novel, Emily Bronte, More Myself Than I. Now, one other passage, and this is from the notebook that I kept as I was planning, researching, and writing the novel, Emily Bronte, More Myself Than I. The point about the plan for this novel is that it is the image pattern, the passionate image pattern in the mind of the main character, the writer Emily Bronte, at the moment when all of the imagery in her mind, imagery of her family and of the developing novel, Wuthering Heights, coalesces into a 50,000 word image construct, which is her mind's attempt to see patterns of meaning in the information, the characters, events, actions, and emotions, to the point of passion, in the almost hysterical Bronte milieu. Every piece of information was filtered through the passionate Bronte mind. Charlotte imagined a passionate Monsieur Heger, who was as passionate as herself. She made him into a character in her mind, though he seems to us to be quite a domesticated fellow. So the real Mr. Heger became the character Mr. Heger in her mind. Emily has left no evidence that she imagined anyone as being as passionate as herself in her daily life. She reserved the objects of the power of imagination for her characters. I assume that Anne was somewhere a little less intense than Charlotte and Emily. I left out some sections here, that's why I'm kind of hesitating. So Anne not so powerful in imagination as Emily and Charlotte, but still able to imagine perhaps some of the people she knew as characters, and then to make up purely imaginary characters. So lastly, I'll just say the creation of actual people as imaginary characters is what we do all the time. People like the Bronte siblings did it to the extreme, and a very extreme example of very, very passionate characters, but echoing the passionate Emily Bronte is Wuthering Heights. Now, just to mention of some websites, of course, the novel can be found on Amazon. It's Emily Bronte, More Myself Than I, a novel by John Passfield. It can be found on my publisher's website, rocksmillspress.com, ROCKSMILLSPRESS, all one word, .com, with more information about it. And then lastly, a journal and a notebook. I write 3 books when I write one. I write a novel, Emily Bronte, More Myself Than I write a notebook, which is book length, as I'm planning, researching, and writing. Go to johnpassfieldbook.ca, go to notebooks at the top, click on the Bronte image, free. I'm not selling these, I'm giving them away. You can access that notebook. If you go to the same website, johnpassfield.ca, go to journals at the top and then click on the Bronte icon, you'll get my journal, which again is book length and free. And lastly, I'll just say thank you for watching this video.